Good evening and welcome back to Empty Cloud Monastery. My name is Bhante Suddhāso and we'll be looking at another discourse of the Buddha today. So this one is from the Anguttara Nikaya, chapter 4. So we'll start with paying homage to the Buddha, and then I'll go through the discourse and give some explanations and then take questions at the end. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So this time we'll be looking at Anguttara Nikaya chapter 4, sutta number 157. The Roga Sutta. So the word Roga literally means sickness or illness or disease. So that's the title of this discourse. And the discourse begins. The Buddha says, monks, there are two kinds of illness. What two? Mental illness and physical illness. Actually, it's the other way around in the text. It's Kaya Kacha Rogo, so physical illness and mental illness. I don't know why the translator here reversed the order of these. So physical illness and mental illness. And the Buddha says, monks, some people can be seen who are free of illness, free of physical illness for 1 year or 2 years or 3 years or 4 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, even up to 100 years or more. But the Buddha says, but it's very hard to find anyone in the world who can claim to be free of mental illness, even for a moment, except for those who have eliminated their defilements. So this is the opening statement of this sutta, and actually I find this really delicious. This is something which I quote quite often. The Buddha is basically saying here that everyone who's not fully enlightened is crazy. Everyone who's not fully enlightened is to some degree mentally ill. So we don't normally relate to it that way. We normally think like, oh, I'm a perfectly normal person. I'm relatively sane, relatively mentally healthy. It's like, well, no, you're afflicted with the illness of greed, hatred, and delusion. You're afflicted with attachment, with craving. You're afflicted with the delusion that pleasure can be found through your senses. You're afflicted with the delusion that if you can just avoid unpleasant things, then everything will be fine. You're afflicted with the delusion of ongoing self-existence. So the mind is actually constantly in a state of insanity. For anyone who's not fully awakened, the mind is to some degree afflicted. It's diseased. And so again, the Buddha is saying you can find lots of people in the world who are physically healthy, but finding people who are mentally healthy is nearly impossible. Everyone who's not fully awakened has some degree of mental illness. So then the Buddha continues in talking about the theme of illnesses. He says, there are 4 kinds of illness for those who have gone forth. So for renunciants. So pabhijita is the Pali word. Pabhijita means one who has renounced, one who has left behind. So one who has taken on a renunciant contemplative life. So the word pabhijita then normally refers to monastics or people who are living a renunciant contemplative life of some kind. So all Buddhist monks are by definition pabhijita, but in the time of the Buddha, the word pabhijita also had a broader sense of meaning. Also people of other religious or spiritual traditions who were living some kind of renunciant contemplative life. So the Buddha says, there are 4 kinds of illness for renunciants, pabhijita. What for? Says first, there's a monk who has many wishes. The Pali word here is mahiccho, which maha means great or expansive, and icha means wishes or desires. So mahiccha can either mean a lot of desires, or it can mean excessive or over-the-top desires, so desires that are too big. So he says, a monk has many wishes or has great wishes. Says, is frustrated and is not content with any kind of robes, alms food, lodgings, and medicines and supplies for the sick. So this is pointing to one of the principles of monastic life in particular, which is the practice of being content with any kind of robes, food, dwelling places, or medicinal supplies. So not being too picky, as long as our basic needs are being met in a way which is sufficiently supportive for our physical well-being and the development of our spiritual practice. So it's not like, oh, they brought Thai food today when I wanted Sri Lankan food, this is awful, or oh, they brought Sri Lankan food when I wanted Thai food, how terrible, but rather it's just being happy with any kind of food. As long as it's able to support the health of your body, then that's sufficient. And the same with the other requisites. So not being too fussy of like, oh, this robe is a little too orange, this robe is a little too red, this robe is a little too dark, this robe is a little too bright, but just being grateful that we have a robe to wear. Not being too fussy about our dwelling. Like, oh, they assigned me to the small cold room when I wanted the big warm room. Well, be happy you have somewhere to stay. It's raining right now here at the monastery, but inside the monastery, it's not raining. How great that we have somewhere to stay where we can be free from the rain, safe from the rain. So not being too fussy about what kind of requisites we're getting, but just being content with the bare minimum. As long as our bare minimum needs are being met, then to be content with that much. And of course, this is particularly a monastic practice, but it's also relevant for lay people. So noticing how much of our suffering is about wanting more than our basic needs. You start thinking about it and you're like, oh, my basic needs are actually extremely low. Most of my suffering is about things which are above and beyond my basic needs, which means all of that suffering is unnecessary. Well, suffering is always unnecessary. But especially when it's above and beyond our basic needs, then it's really clear that we're just unnecessarily generating dukkha for ourselves. So this is why the Buddha calls it a kind of illness, a kind of disease or affliction. So just as a state of disease is when the body is not functioning correctly, it's below its peak capacity, the body is uncomfortable and restricted. In the same way, when the mind is obsessed with wanting particular kinds of requisites, then that's the mind which is diseased, it's afflicted. And the Buddha continues, he says, because of this, they focus their corrupt wishes on being looked up to and on getting material possessions, honor, and popularity. They try hard, strive, and make an effort to get these things. In other words, this is someone who, again, they're not content with their basic minimum, so they're constantly trying to manipulate others in order to get more. They're constantly trying to going out of their way to try to get special things or particularly pleasant or desirable things. And the Buddha continues, he says, they have an ulterior motive when they visit families. They have an ulterior motive when they sit down, when they speak on Dhamma, and even when they hold it in when they need to go to the toilet. So here he's talking about, again, when you're going to visit people, you're doing so with the thought of, oh, how can I manipulate these people into giving me the kind of food that I like? How can I manipulate them into giving me the kind of robes that I like? How can I manipulate them into getting what I want? So rather than going for genuine purposes of compassion or to share the Dhamma or something of that sort, instead it's going just in order to pursue one's cravings, one's wishes for material gain. And he gives the example even of sitting or giving Dhamma talks. So sitting here also can mean doing sitting meditation. So, for example, one is doing sitting meditation, thinking, well, I hope people are really impressed by how committed I am to meditation practice, and then maybe they'll give me really nice things. Or giving Dhamma talks, and you're checking like, oh, how many people are following this? Let me see, how many followers do we have for this Dhamma talk? Ooh, followers are a little bit low, and that's a problem. Not enough followers means somebody might not donate the things that I want. What can I do in order to get more followers? Like, this is what he's talking about, where one is even teaching Dhamma, not for the sake of helping others understand the Dhamma, but rather one is teaching Dhamma in order to gain popularity and to increase access to pleasant and comfortable things. And he gives the example of holding it in when one needs to go to the toilet. So this is talking about even neglecting your immediate bodily needs out of one's desire to try to pursue getting something extra, something special, something which appeals to your desire and craving, rather than just being content with the bare minimum. So this is an affliction. So looking at the mind when the mind is full of desires for unnecessary things, when the mind is so obsessed with unnecessary things that it's going out of its way and even doing things which are uncomfortable or unpleasant in order to try to get our desires met. Noticing how all of that is a very uncomfortable and unpleasant experience. So it's a disease in the mind. It's an affliction in the mind. And so the Buddha says, these are the 4 kinds of illness for those gone forth. And you might be thinking, 4? I thought that was just 1. But the 4 here is that there's one for each of the 4 requisites. So it's one who is pursuing particular kind of robes. So not content with what one has. One is going out of one's way to get particular robes, particular clothing, particular food, particular lodgings, and then particular medicinal supplies. And again, it's important to clarify here that there is a distinction in the suttas being made. So the distinction is between one's basic minimum needs and everything above and beyond that. So when we do the contemplation on the 4 requisites, it's reflecting that we will use these 4 things to the minimum necessary in order to maintain our health, in order to keep our body in good health so we can continue our practice. But it's when the mind is obsessing beyond that. It's trying to get things which are above and beyond our basic minimum. So the 4 kinds of mental illness the Buddha is talking about here is the obsession with each of these 4 things. So obsession with robes, food, dwellings, and medicinal supplies. And so the Buddha says, monks, you should train like this. We will not have many wishes or be frustrated. So this is the basic one. So we don't want the mind to be full of wishes. So again, mahicca can mean either lots of wishes or it can mean wishes for something grand. So desire for something exceptional or special. And he says, we will be content with any kind of robes, alms food, lodgings, and medicines and supplies for the sick. So this is the aspiration, to be content with just the basic minimum of the 4 requisites. He says, we will not focus our corrupt wishes on being looked up to and on getting material possessions, honor, and popularity. We won't try hard, strive, and make an effort to get these things. So this is, again, it's the saying of when we make this aspiration, we're not going to try to manipulate others in order to fulfill our desires. And he continues, we should make the aspiration. We will endure cold, heat, hunger, and thirst. We will endure the touch of flies, mosquitoes, wind, sun, and reptiles. We will endure rude and unwelcome criticism. We will put up with physical pain, sharp, severe, acute, unpleasant, disagreeable, and life-threatening. That's how you should train. So this is the aspiration. The aspiration is that we will train the mind to be able to endure all manner of physical sensations, all manner of physical discomfort. So training the mind in equanimity with any kind of physical discomfort, and even with harsh and unpleasant speech from others. even training the mind to endure the discomfort of what others might say to us. So that's the end of this sutta. So a short and straightforward discourse. So I don't have much else to say. I think the sutta speaks pretty clearly for itself. So at this time, we'll respect the sutta with 3 sadhus, and I'll see if there's any questions. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So hello to the people joining in online. Hello to John, Richard, Manal, Karuna, Mary, Alex, Vivian, Maria, Kim, Aparna, Gregory, and Gita. Good to see all of you. And I don't see any questions online. So if there's no questions from the residents here either, maybe that will be enough for now. Okay. Okay, so that looks like it for this evening. So thank you all for joining in, and we'll see you next time.